The Spider-Man musical sounds like a fun, family-friendly spectacle, and it was meant to be, but it certainly didn't turn out that way. Not for lack of trying in the fact that it was a family-friendly show, but more so due to the fact that the actual show and the production itself had so many injuries, they pretty much had to cancel it due to the fact that it was so dangerous. So yeah, with all the accidents and injuries happening on set, this show was basically just a walking lawsuit waiting to happen. So yes, today we're going to draw back the curtain and find out how this happened and what ultimately killed this show. Because oh boy, it's an interesting one today. Hello! Welcome to Brainspill, the laziest show on the internet. My name is Tank, and today we are talking about Spider-Man. But not just Spider-Man, a Spider-Man musical. Who's ready for some high-flying Spidey action? If you liked the 2002 Spider-Man movie and the Spider-Man 2 movie released in 2004, you're gonna love this. So, this musical was called Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. This was a musical based on the Marvel Comics character Spider-Man, incorporating elements from those two mentioned movies, telling the origin story of Peter Parker, his romance with Mary Jane Watson, and his battles with the Green Goblin. All pretty standard stuff if we're talking about a musical based on Spider-Man. This wasn't just any production, however, as this was a full-blown Broadway musical. It was very technical and had a lot of aerial stunts and combat scenes, so this was something that was quite the operation behind the scenes. This had incredibly complicated and technical stunts involving aerial combat scenes and actors swinging from webs that suspended the Spider-Man actor in the air. But this was also partly why the whole idea of making a high-flying action Broadway musical is that somebody is bound to get hurt. You know, with the benefit of hindsight and all that. Just saying. The production was described early on as the most technically complex show ever on Broadway, with 27 aerial sequences of characters flying and engaging in aerial combat. The set had many moving pieces, large projections and heavy equipment, which made the whole production complicated. So much so that the studio even avoided hiring from out of town due to the technical nature of the production. So when the production was finished and ready for public release in 2011, the test screenings didn't really go down that well. There was quite a mixed reaction and it was probably quite lulled in comparison to what they were expecting. Which I can imagine is very disheartening when you make a technical marvel, no pun intended, and it basically just flops. However, this was the least of their problems when the actors started getting themselves into various scrapes and situations which would spell doom for the entire production. So much so that even on the preview performance prior to this in November 2010, the lead actress had already suffered a concussion when standing off stage when she was hit with a rope holding some equipment. The actress, Natalie Mendoza, who played the villainess Arachne, didn't initially report the injury until later when she fell ill. She would then not return to the following show and, against her doctor's advice, then decided to come back after for a later show in which to carry on the role. This is where her character has a lot of high-flying sequences being suspended in mid-air and having to even be spun upside down whilst doing so. I hope that she was getting paid fairly well for this, because if that was me, I would probably think twice before going back on a production like that. You might think that she was the first case and that the rest were to follow, but no. We're going further back in time to the rehearsals when one character broke her wrists after landing incorrectly during a flying stunt, whilst another actor injured his feet doing the same stunt, and yet they still went ahead. Christopher Turney, the Spider-Man stunt performer, was injured and hospitalised after a preview show in December 2010, when he fell 21 feet off a piece of scenery when his harness was not connected to the safety cord, leaving him to free fall through the stage and into the orchestra pit. That is terrible, and thankfully injuries weren't anything too severe, but seriously? I'm so surprised this show even went ahead. Following the accident, the actress Natalie Mendoza pulled out of the production indefinitely, being replaced by TV Carpio, another actress who would later be injured in March 2011, having hurt her neck and left the show for 2 weeks. As well as the injuries and the likely lawsuits that came from them, all of these injuries and actors having to take time off hampered the production and the viewings of the show. meaning that this cost them quite a lot of money. So much so that by this stage, the show had cost them about $65 million, which was more than double any other Broadway musical that had ever been shown at the time. And this was even before the premiere in 2011. So yes, there's many questions as to why they decided to push ahead with this, and maybe that's the answer. Not so much due to the fact that this entire set was one walking health hazard, but maybe due to the fact that they'd already sunk so much money into this thing, they needed to make something back. So why not go ahead, I guess. Yes, they needed their pound of flesh, and no, I'm not talking about injuries, but what I mean is anything to try and plug that $65 million hole that was burning through their pockets. Critics of the show blamed the delayed opening night on the fact that the production was unfinished, which resulted in many of the shows receiving poor reviews. This isn't good for your image, particularly when you're trying to patch that $65 million hole we talked about, but there we are. The show was suspended following this for a month to try and reboot the show and to reinstate a new ending, to which safety inspectors were also called from the New York State Department of Labor to review the scenes in the show, eventually citing 2 workplace safety violations. And then the United States Occupational Safety and Health Administration fined the show $12,600 in March 2011 for 3 further violations of safety measures. I mean, at this point, I wouldn't even know what to suggest. I'd just be curled up in a corner crying, because what do you do? Yes, despite all the injuries, despite all the negative reviews and press, despite the fines they were given, they still pushed ahead with the production. And to top it all off, the final noteworthy injury in the entire saga came from actor Daniel Curry, who was playing a villain and was also a Spider-Man stunt double during the show, when on the 15th of August 2013, he was hurt by apparently being pinned under a piece of equipment and suffered leg trauma. I'm just at a complete loss how this could keep happening, but apparently it did. Guess their Spidey sense wasn't quite up to scratch. I mean, I know they're only actors, but, well, clearly they're not the real Spider-Man. The injury-prone production has become a point of ridicule in other media and pop culture in years gone by, but the show ran for some time thereafter until it became very clear that they were gonna lose a lot of money, meaning that the final show was shown in January 2014. The reason for this was cited due to the fact of falling ticket sales, and apparently they were no longer able to get the injury insurance required for the production. I mean, at this point I would be surprised, but really, all I'm gonna say is, no shit, half your cast got injured, so what did you expect? The production failed to make back its $75 million cost in total, the largest in Broadway history. Investors reportedly losing $60 million in this anticlimactic Spider-Man special. Those shareholders are probably gonna have to lick their wounds after that one. And yes, that's the story of Spider-Man the musical. If you guys like that video, here's another one just like it. I'll see you guys in the next video. Fantastic.